This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit.
The picture you must see from the beginning, or not at all, for no one will be seated after the start of Alfred Hitchcock's greatest shocker. It's Psycho, and this film is lit.
That's the actual tagline from the movie, and I felt like because of how it's written, it must be supposed to be read in like a 60s announcer voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of how it feels, but I don't know if that's accurate. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We're fully in to the spooky season, and so we're kicking in with one of the all-time classics, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. This is, we wanted to mention at the beginning, a patron request from one of our Academy Award-winning patrons. This time, that request is from Gray Hightower. Gray, thank you for supporting us, and thank you for requesting this film/book. If you want to do the same, you can head over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for $15 a month. And we will add you to our priority recommendation queue, which gets you way higher up the list. We are scheduled out pretty far, so it won't be very immediate, but it will go to the next in the queue of our requests. So yeah, moves you up that list as long as you stick around for a couple months. You can't just sign up. I mean, you technically can, but
we can't stop.
We can't stop you, but. Do us a favor and stick around for a couple months at least. Because you also get access to a bunch of bonus content, which right after we get done recording this episode, we're going to record our bonus review of Get Out, which is our September bonus episode. We just watched Get Out for the first time, and we're going to talk about it. So you can check that out. You get that for $5 and up per month. All right, we've got all of our segments, so let's get into our first one where we give you a little breakdown in case it's been a while since you've seen Psycho in Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Marion Crane, a secretary, embezzles $40,000 from one of her employer's obnoxious clients and goes on the run to meet up with her boyfriend Sam so he can use the cash to pay off his debts so they can finally be free to get married. On the way, she stops for the night at a remote hotel run by Norman Bates, a young man under the domineering control of his mother. After checking in and speaking to Norman for a while, Marion takes a shower before turning in for the night. While in the shower, she's violently stabbed to death by Norman's mother. Norman must then clean up the crime scene and do his best to quell any further suspicion about Marion and her whereabouts. The next day, I think it's the next day, it could be down.
It's like a week later.
Yeah, it could be like a week later. A private investigator shows up, Detective Arbogast, paid for by Marion's sister Lila and Sam, her boyfriend. He shows up at the motel to try to track down Marion. After almost stumbling upon a secret, he is also brutally murdered by Mrs. Bates, and Norman is once again forced to clean up after his mother. When they don't hear from Arbogast, Sam and Lila decide to take the investigation into their own hands and head out to the Bates Motel themselves, the last known location where they received a call from Arbogast. After some snooping around, Lila decides to question Mrs. Bates herself as she thinks she must know something about Marion and her whereabouts. After sneaking into the Bates house, Lila comes across a grisly discovery: Mrs. Bates' corpse rotting in the basement. She is then attacked by Norman, dressed up in his mother's clothes and a wig, but luckily Sam shows up just in the nick of time to subdue Norman and save Lila. It is then revealed that Norman had been suffering from some form of dissociative identity disorder, not called that at the time, and had assumed the role of his mother and had been killing victims in the quote-unquote character of his mother. And the story ends with Bates in custody, fully dissociating into his mother's personality. The end. Did I miss anything important?
No, I think you got it all.
There you go. All right, we have 4 questions for our game show round, so let's go ahead and play Guess who?
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay?
The light shone down on his plump face, reflected from his rimless glasses, bathed the pinkness of his scalp beneath thinning sandy hair.
Boy. Oh, I bet I know who this is. Light shone down on his plump face, reflected from his rimless glasses, bathed the pinkness of his scalp beneath thinning sandy hair. I bet this, because this guy has glasses. It took me a second to place who this probably would be. But this guy has glasses in the movie, and I think he's bald, but close enough. And this would be, and I don't know his name, Marion's boss.
This would be Norman Bates.
Oh, interesting. So he has glasses in the book.
Yeah.
And a plump face, because Anthony Perkins is anything but...
Anthony Perkins, quite trim.
Yes, very, very
Very
thin man. And he, I don't know, I wouldn't say he has thinning hair. So, and it's not sandy, it's dark. Boy, all of those, none of the things. Literally none of the things. Interesting. Okay, fair enough.
He was tall, thin, and deeply tanned. A gray Stetson shadowed his forehead, but not his eyes. The eyes were ice blue and ice hard.
Okay, so there is a guy who wears a Stetson in the movie, but I'm wondering if this maybe isn't him. And that would be the obnoxious guy who Marion steals the $40,000 from, or who gives her the money to, and she's asked to take it to the bank, and he's a creep, and she ends up taking his money. But the eyes are ice blue and ice hard makes me think that this is a different character. And my guess for this would be that this is actually the detective would be maybe the detective or the investigator or whatever. Arbogast maybe has a Stetson in the book and he doesn't in the movie. Because it's one of those two I would either say it's the guy from the beginning who she takes the money from, or it's Arbogast. And I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go and say the movie kept the Stetson. I don't think the ice blue and ice hard eyes like track with his character in the movie, but I'm still gonna say that is that guy she steals money from.
You should have gone with your other instinct.
Damn it.
It's Arbogast.
I had a feeling the eyes being ice blue and ice hard implies, a different type of character than we get with, a much more sort of like knowing and cunning and like calculated character. Whereas the guy with the money in the beginning is just like an obnoxious blowhard.
Yeah.
Like he's just, darn it. Okay.
Okay, well, I think you'll get the next one. A headscarf concealed the hair, and the glassy eyes stared inhumanely. But it wasn't a mask, it couldn't be. The skin had been powdered dead white, and 2 hectic spots of rouge centered on the cheekbones.
Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this would be Norma Bates, I believe is her name, the mother, the dead body of the mother of. I mean, because that's the only other person, although, unless the perspective, no, it's got to be his mother's body.
Well, technically, it's him dressed as his mother.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'll give you that
I
one.
thought this was like the reveal of her finding the body, and he had like sort of you know what I mean? That's what the implication I got here. Okay. I don't know how you thought I would get that. I don't know why you would think I would think that and not the body of the mother based on that description. But fair enough. Because he doesn't have makeup in the movie.
No, he doesn't put it in. Well, the one time we see him.
Yeah, and just like the glassy eyes stared inhumanely, wasn't a mask, it couldn't be, made me think like she thought it looked like a Halloween mask or something. And then the skin had been powdered dead white and 2 spots of rouge. I just assumed he had been put makeup on the corpse of his mother, which would have made sense. Okay, fair enough.
The man was tall, broad across the shoulders, and paunchily protruding at the waistline. He wore a blue serge suit, and his red seamed neck twisted in rebellion against the restraint of a white starched collar. He had curly graying hair and curly black eyebrows.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, there's not that many characters left. It could be somebody I guessed already and was incorrect about. This, like, being either the guy with the money or the boss, because I don't think this would be Sam again, unless they just cast Sam completely against the look of this guy, because Sam does not have gray hair and he's not paunchy at the waistline and the blue. I don't know what a surge suit is, to be fair.
I think it's a type of fabric.
Okay. I don't know who else it would be. I'm trying to think what other people show up. Like what? Because there's not that many characters in the movie. Oh, wait. I think I know. I think I figured it out. I'm gonna say that this is the psychiatrist at the end.
It's the sheriff.
Who's that?
The sheriff that they go talk to.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, could be him too. I guess that makes sense. I mean, yeah. Also, colors are no help in.
I know.
It's a black and white movie, so the colors are zero help in terms of that kind of thing. And I mean, it doesn't really look like the psychiatrist, but I was just trying to think of other characters. It actually, that does like at least kind of fit with from what I remember of the sheriff. Mm-hmm. He's just such a forgettable character in the grand scheme of things. Like the psychiatrist gets like a big grandiose monologue, so he's like more memorable. But yeah, okay, cool, great. You got none of those.
Kind of a rough one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's no way I could have got that first one. That first one, everybody would guess the boss. Yeah. He has glasses, he's bald, and he's kind of like, plump or whatever. That's nothing like Norman Bates.
No, it's not.
The Stetson, I got there, but I just went with the guy who actually had the Stetson in the movie, but I had the other right guess. And then the other one, I don't think anybody, I think most people would have missed most of those, but maybe not. Who knows? Tell us how you did if you played along. How did you do? Because that was impossible. All right, I have some questions. Let's go ahead and find out what was in the book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
All right, so my first question is about the setup. I'm assuming that at least some of the second, like the middle and second part or second half, the middle and last third of this movie, I would imagine, share a lot of similarities to the book, but I was wondering if maybe the setup was different and they're just like pulling the killer at a motel sort of angle of things from the book. And so the setup with the assistant, Marion, and then her down on his luck lover coming across $40,000 in unaccounted bills from some rich asshole, and then she decides to steal it and then ends up at a motel. Is that like the setup that we get in the book for? I say setup. It's like the first half of the story, but...
Yeah, it's the same setup.
Okay.
It's the reason that Mary ends up at the Bates Motel. She's Mary in the book, not Marion, so I'm probably going to use it interchangeably, but they're close enough.
Close
so I'm
enough,
like,
yeah.
The big difference in the book is that we don't start with Mary and Sam, because the movie starts with them like canoodling in a hotel somewhere, and then we go to work with her. The book starts with Norman at the hotel.
Interesting.
And then we pop over to Mary, and she's already stolen the money, and she's driving.
Okay.
And that is definitely something that I had in better in the movie.
Yeah.
I liked the change of starting with Marion and seeing her interact with Sam, which is something that we never actually see in the book.
Yeah.
She thinks about him a lot.
Yeah.
During the brief portion of the book that she's alive.
Yeah.
But we never actually see them interact with each other. So I liked seeing that. I liked seeing how she set herself down that path. Like I said, all of that is delivered via her inner monologue in the book, and I liked getting to see it play out in real time. I thought that was more interesting.
I also think, based on what you said, that I like it from the aspect of not priming us for who is potentially responsible for what's going to happen. Like, I like not getting at not setting up the motel or Norman at all before we arrive there.
Yeah, I
mean,
agree.
especially back then at a time where like you wouldn't have stuff spoiled for you in the same way, and like there isn't trailers are very different, as we talked about. I mean, now the trailer does go to great lengths. I included some of it in the prequel episode. It's 6 minutes long, and it's just Alfred Hitchcock walking through all the sets at the motel, talking about how there was a murder here and stuff like that. And it does give away some stuff, but just apart from that, I think that bringing in Norman's character, he shows up 40 minutes into the movie. Before that, we had never seen him at all. And I actually had a note about that later that it's just like, I always forget that the first 35 of minutes of this movie, there's no motel, there's no Norman Bates, there's no nothing. It's just like this drama about a woman stealing money.
Yeah.
And then it turns into something else entirely, which is really interesting. And I think that's more interesting. Starting the movie as one thing and then having it completely left turn into this entirely different film is way more interesting than having Norman show up at the beginning and prepping us, seeding us to know something's going on with this.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't know that when she arrives at the motel.
Yeah,
and,
no,
I
agree.
do because
of cultural osmosis. But you're right. If you think about somebody going to the theater to see this movie in 1960,
who very likely maybe hadn't seen the trailer for it,
maybe
or
they
whatever.
didn't see a trailer, but they certainly haven't gotten on Facebook and seen somebody talking about how Norman Bates is the killer,
right? And so I think that would be I think that's a really interesting way to structure it in comparison to the book. I just think it sets up such a better left turn and
if you think
pull.
about that kind of structure too, where they set up one kind of movie and then it turns into a different kind of movie, it's a ballsy move to kill your leading lady 45 minutes in.
It really is, yeah. Yeah, and in particular, I think she was fairly popular actress at the time too. I could be wrong about that, but I think she was. So yeah, I think that's way more interesting than the book's version. So then, as she's running, she falls asleep in her car and she gets woken up by a cop who then just won't stop following her. And I wanted to know if that obnoxious fucking cop was from the book, because he looks like. He looks like somebody in particular, a modern actor, and it was driving me crazy. I couldn't place the guy, like a guy from Starship Troopers or something. Anyways, I'll try to figure out if I can figure out who that actor he reminds me of is. But there's some modern actor that his face shape was identical. But anyways, is that obnoxious stalker cop from the book?
No, there's no cop in the book. I did think that maybe the movie was going to come back to him. Maybe while they were looking for her or something, but it didn't.
No, I think that's just an early tension to bring some tension into the film, because otherwise, at this point, that point in the film, if he's not there or anything like that, we have very little tension pushing.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It becomes just a story of her driving to this house. You know what I mean? There's no looming tension, and since it is ostensibly a thriller, I feel like he probably felt they needed some sort of impetus for that tension at the beginning, would be my guess. And what better than a terrifying cop? There's this moment in the film where she's driving and she's imagining the conversation going on back. At the office between the people whose money she took and stuff, and she hits this little grin that grows on her face in the film, and it's actually, if you watch it, it's very reminiscent of Bates's kind of grin at the end of similar-ish. It's that kind of slow growing, very subtle, creepy kind of grin as she is imagining this conversation of them talking about her stealing the money and how she got one over on them. And I wanted to know if that her thinking of that conversation or her imagining the conversation going on back from the people she stole the money from came from the book, and also if if she derives any sort of pleasure from it, because I think that's a really interesting little detail for the ostensibly protagonist of the film at this point, kind of, to be reveling in this bad thing. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, that moment in the film, and I want to know if it had any parallel in the book.
No, she doesn't imagine any conversations while she's driving. And I didn't feel like I got the vibe that she I don't know.
Okay, and that's fair. I just, yeah, it was just something about that moment, and it's a very short moment in the movie, but she gets this like look on her face, and it is, like I said, it's kind of reminiscent of Norman Bates's look at the end of like this sort of crazed glee, but in a very subtle like grin kind of look. And I just thought it was a really interesting
Well, and I think that the movie
moment.
kind of moving things around, like we talked about a few minutes ago, left an opening for that, because while she's driving in the book, mainly what we're getting is the backstory.
Yeah.
Right? We're learning all about how she's stolen this money, and she's worried about how she's going to get Sam to accept the money.
That's one thing I was wondering. I couldn't tell in the movie, and I think I had a question about that. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, you have a question about it later.
But I couldn't tell if Sam knew or what the deal. Like,
No, he doesn't.
I didn't think so, but
But yeah, and she's thinking about that, and she has this big hang up in the book about like getting old, even though she's only 27.
yeah.
She wants to like get married before she's 30, but Sam wants to like wait and pay off his debts, and she has this like obsession about it.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we're getting while she's driving.
Okay. Yeah, like the whole backstory.
Yeah.
So then she arrives at the motel, and I wanted to know if, I assume, but who knows, if it is in fact the Bates Motel.
Yes.
And does it have the big house up on the hill behind the motel with a single light on and the silhouette in the window when she arrives?
I mean, there is the big house
Okay.
up behind the motel. And there are a couple times that characters see the silhouette of the mother in the window.
Okay.
I would say that like that whole visual altogether is maybe more of a movie thing. Like there's not like, I feel like the movie made more of a thing out of like the single light and the silhouette than maybe the book did. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I get yeah. But it is, there is people. Okay. So yeah, it's from the book. Specific line, and I was trying to pull, this movie actually doesn't have that many, at least in my opinion, like iconic lines necessarily. It has a few, and I tried to get most of them in, but there one of them is early on, as she's talking to Norman, he says to her, a boy's best friend is his mother, which I feel like I remember people like being a line that people remember from the movie, and I want to know if that came from the book.
I don't recall this exact line, and I wasn't able to find it. I checked a couple places that I thought it might be, but I couldn't get a digital copy of this one, so I wasn't able to just like search for it. So I don't recall it, wasn't able to find it, so I'm gonna say no, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay. Next question. This one's gonna be interesting because it's kind of complicated. Not really, I guess, but in the film, we hear conversations between Norman and his mother, and other characters do. In that beginning part, when she first shows up, she hears, I think it's her. At one point, somebody for sure overhears Norman having a conversation with his mother. And I was wondering if that happens in the book, and if so in the movie, I was like, wait, is that Anthony Perkins? Because obviously I knew the twist. I know that his mom's dead. So I'm like, is that Anthony Perkins doing that voice? And I looked it up, and it's not. It's some woman.
I don't know why. That would have been great.
It's a woman named Virginia Gregg who passed away not too long ago, I think. But so it was an actress named Virginia Gregg who was doing the voice. But that also feels like a cheat to me.
Yeah.
Because especially when other people are overhearing it, the fact that the voice, like, it would be one thing if nobody overheard it, and so it was like just a thing that we were hearing, and then it's actually maybe it wasn't something that we were actually hearing. It was sort of like more something we were like given access inside Norman's head or something. But no, these are actual vocalized conversations he's having. And which he would be doing both sides of the conversation, and it doesn't. There's very clearly not him doing the voice, and I was like, that's shenanigans. That feels like cheating a little bit, but fair enough, I guess. But it's also cheating, anyways. Do we hear, or do any characters hear Norman's mother in the book? And if so, like, yeah, is there any description of that, or what's going on?
So most of the book is actually spent in Norman's perspective. And we do see quite a few quote unquote conversations with his mother. I don't think any other character quote unquote hears her until the end when Lila is in the cellar. But again, I might be misremembering that. But like we do see like what we initially think are conversations between him and his mother in the book. And of course later come to find out it's just him talking to himself.
Right. But in the book and I guess so in the book does it say like does it do dialogue traditionally? Does it say like his mother said or something like that when we see those conversations? I guess I'm trying to see if there's a similar parallel in the book where it does a mislead in the same way that the movie does, where it kind of cheats. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say I think the book does a little bit of a better job at making it ambiguous.
Okay.
I think you could definitely, like, especially if you were reading it knowing how it ends, like, see the lines from his mother and be like, okay, I understand what's going on here. Mm-hmm. But I think you could also read it and just think that someone is talking to him.
Yeah. Okay. I would be really interested to actually see how it's written, like, on the page, because...
Well, we have the book right here.
I know, but you didn't open it, so I didn't I didn't want to be like, hey, open it and look. Okay, so it does dialogue without it never, whenever, at least from these 2 pages, whenever she says a line, it doesn't say like mother said. Mm-hmm. It just does the thing where it's just like a standalone line of dialogue. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
You know, like we don't get like the not parentheticals, but whatever it's called.
Dialogue tags.
Dialogue tags for the mother. We only get dialogue tags for Norman.
Right.
That was my question.
We can read that either way, right? If you're reading through this and you genuinely do not know how it ends and you don't know that she's dead, then you're just reading a convention of novels, which is to put in dialogue without dialogue tags.
Yeah, that's not that uncommon.
Yeah. But if you do know the end, or if you're rereading it, you can be like, oh, I see what you did there.
It works, and that was my whole question in comparison to the movie, where the movie's version of doing this would be if Anthony Perkins was actually doing the voice, but just, doing a very stilted version of the voice or something, but it was actually him. Whereas what the movie actually does is just uses an actress to do it. So it feels like cheating, whereas the book didn't quite cheat in that way.
No, I agree.
And again, it's
different. Anthony
Different.
Perkins should have done the voice.
I think Anthony Perkins
better
should
in
have
the
done the
book.
voice as well. Okay. That was glad we solved that. Does Norman Bates have a bird taxidermy hobby? Because he does in the movie, and it's very creepy.
Taxidermy, yes, but not birds specifically.
Okay. And is that, I wonder if that's just a nod to Hitchcock's fascination with birds in general.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Because this is pre-birds, but he probably had the idea for the birds at this point.
Yeah.
And probably already had a preconceived sort of, or not preconceived, but probably already had a bit of a fascination.
Or maybe
with birds,
he had a friend with a bunch of taxidermy birds who was like, I'll lend you all these birds for the movie.
Yeah, my guess would be that he's just, and I'm sure we talked about it in the birds episode, but that was like the 8th episode we did, so I don't.
That was like our 4th episode.
Whatever. It was in the first
early.
10. Yeah, it was in the first 10. So I don't remember anything about it, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's always sort of inherently found birds creepy or whatever, and so he made it birds in this, and then that was just.
Birds are pretty creepy.
I don't think they're creepy.
I'm gonna go on record. I think birds are a little creepy.
I know some people. I don't find.
I'm
birds
not like
creepy
scared
at all.
of birds, but I think they're a little creepy.
0% creepy.
They're dinosaurs.
See, now I feel like we've had this conversation before.
We definitely had
on
this
the birds episode.
Birds episode, yes.
Does Norman have a creeper hole, a peephole that he can spy on people with?
Yes, he does have a peephole.
This big scene. It's the most iconic scene in maybe film history. Maybe it's in top 5.
It's up there.
It's got to be top 5 most iconic sort of film moments ever, and that is the shower murder scene. Does Mrs. Bates stab Marion to death in the shower? Does that scene come from the book?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It is exactly the same, except that in the book, she cuts off Mary's head.
Oh, wow.
So it's stabby, stab, stab, and also hacky, hack, hack.
Okay. Wild. Do you know where that is? Can you read a little bit of that just for the sake of comparison?
Oh, I can't read the actual murder scene because... Wait, no, here we go.
Or just whatever the
it,
representation of it is in the book.
Yeah, a lot of this is built on what you don't see
Right.
in the text.
Okay.
Okay. That's why she didn't hear the door open or note the sound of footsteps. And at first, when the shower curtains parted, the steam obscured the face. Mm-hmm. Then she did see it there, just a face peering through the curtains, hanging in midair like a mask. A headscarf concealed the hair, and the glassy eyes stared inhumanly. But it wasn't a mask. It couldn't be. The skin had been powdered dead white, and 2 hectic spots of rouge centered on the cheekbones. It wasn't a mask. It was the face of a crazy old woman. Mary started to scream, and the curtains parted further, and a hand appeared holding a butcher's knife. It was the knife that, a moment later, cut off her scream. And her head.
Oh, there you go.
I posted on my Twitter the other day as I was finishing up this book the ending of every chapter in Psycho and like a gif of a character going dun dun dun.
Yeah.
Because every chapter ends like that in this book. Every single one.
He went to the I know now I can't remember the author's name. Or I guess this author went to this guy, the Robert Bloch School of Writing, because the guy who wrote Da Vinci Code.
Oh, Dan Brown.
Dan Brown. Have you read the Da Vinci Code?
I haven't read the Da Vinci Code, but I read Angels and Demons, and I know what you're talking about.
Same, because in Da Vinci Code, literally every chapter ends with a like what?
Yeah.
And it's been over a decade since I read the Da Vinci Code, but it's probably been like 15 years. I read it in high school, I think. But yeah, it's very similar. Like every chapter ends with that like crazy cliffhanger. Like what? Yeah. So then after he gets rid of the body and everything, the detective, the investigator, shows up and is sort of questioning Norman. And this scene in the movie is fantastic. It's really slow, deliberate scene where he's asking Norman questions and he keeps getting more and more nervous and sort of revealing more and more as he goes and contradicting himself. And there's this really cool shot at one point where he's showing him something and it's shot from underneath, like up from underneath, and Norman like leans over and looks.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a crazy looking shot.
It's a crazy looking shot, but like this whole scene is like a masterclass in uncomfortable framing and the editing, because the frenetic pace of the editing keeps like amping up with the conversation as Norman gets more and more nervous, and like the framing is tighter and more claustrophobic. It's just an incredible scene, and I wanted to know if that scene in general played out like that in the book.
There's a very similar scene. Obviously, we do get a scene where Arbogast questions Norman. I wouldn't say that it's quite the same. Again, the main difference being that we're in Norman's perspective.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that's... That is interesting. A complete, like, having that perspective switch... Which it's not a switch, because in the movie we're just sort of like third person perspective.
We're just watching.
We're not in anybody's perspective per se. We're just kind of watching things play out. So it is interesting, I think, I think it's, I don't know, the book. I would be interested to see how the book's mystery plays out when you're in. Did you guess the ending? I guess we could talk about that later. I don't know if you had that conversation, but I did want to know that. I wanted to know if you guessed the ending.
I figured out where I thought it was going to be going.
Okay.
Fairly early in the book.
And I wonder if, and see, we'll never be able to do it. I was wondering if the movie, if you would have figured it out.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Because I remember I didn't figure it out when I saw this movie, but I saw it as a kid. Like, I was like a little kid when I saw this the first time. You know, I was probably like 8 or 9 or something like that. And so, yeah, I guess I'm wondering if being in his perspective in the book makes it easier to suss out the mystery or the twist.
I do have some thoughts on that in my final verdict.
Okay, cool. Then we'll get to it then. So then the detective, after he does some more investigating, he wants to go into the house and talk to, I think he wants to go talk to Norma Bates or he just wants to go look for something. He's snooping around in the house and he walks up the stairs and then another classic shot, 2 classic shots in the movie. One, the overhead shot from the stairwell where his mom comes walking out of the room all of a sudden and stabs the guy in the head. And then the classic stairwell falling down shot. And I want to know if Arbogast, if they were visually capturing a moment from the book, or if they created that whole scene from whole cloth in the movie.
I would say that they created it from whole cloth.
Okay.
In the book, Norman describes seeing his mother swing a razor blade at Arbogast, but then the chapter ends.
Okay.
Dun, 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 so it cuts off. But I got the vibe that he was just at the front door and not actually in the house. Okay. Although I guess he could have fallen down the porch stairs.
He could have. But they wouldn't have been nearly as long or dramatic of a fall.
It would not have been as dramatic.
I also, that moment always cracks me up in the movie because of the way he falls and the sound effects. It's like he's floating down the stairs.
Yeah.
Because, like, in that moment, in reality, he would, like, tumble.
Yeah, he would have a real hard fall. He would,
like, roll. But in the movie, his feet seem to be hitting every step as he falls. Like, if you listen, and you even see a shot at one moment of his feet, like, hitting the bottom steps or whatever. And it's like which is actually what it was in the movie. They had him, like, when they shot it, I believe I read about this, is that he's essentially laying on, like, a stretcher that is, like, attached to some sort of crane system that is, like, you know, like lowering him down.
Pulling him down, kind of.
Or, yeah, like, lowering him down the stairs, basically. And it had like a camera attached to it or something like that. But yeah, it was always funny to me in the movie because it's like, well, you wouldn't fall down the stairs like that. Like, that's not how you fall down the stairs. It's still a great shot and a great moment, but it is one of those that feels a little, in comparison to how realistic the shower scene stabbing feels, relatively speaking, that moment feels like this heightened, strange, like
an artistic interpretation of death.
Yes.
He gently tumbles down into the embrace of death.
He doesn't tumble. He floats.
He floats into the embrace of death.
Yeah. So we actually get a relatively not early. There's only like 30 minutes left in the movie or whatever. But we get this reveal when they go to visit the sheriff. And they're like, I think this is Sam and Lila at this point, who are like, hey, we were up there and we saw... Or not, they have talked to the detective and he said he saw a woman in the house or whatever. And they're like, there's this woman in the house, and he's like, but Norma's been dead for 10 years. If Norma Bates is up in that house, then who's buried out in Green Lawn Cemetery? And it's like, dun, dun, dun. And is that how a chapter ends?
Kind of.
Oh! As soon as I said it, I was like, wait, I bet that's the end of a chapter. Because we get this kind of early reveal that his mom is dead, it kind of cluing us in before the final, like, you know, in your face revelation that it has been Norman this whole time. Mm-hmm. We get a much more subtle sort of like, oh, well then who is it? What is going on up there? Maybe there's somebody else living with them or something. But so that's from the book.
So that is revealed by the sheriff, and it is right around the same time in the narrative. That exact line isn't from the book, but I did like it.
Yeah.
The sheriff stared at Lila, then broke off with an aimless wave of the hand. Anyways, they never did get married. Something must have went wrong. Maybe she was in a family way. Maybe Considine had a wife back where he came from. But one night, they both took strychnine together. Regular poison pact, you might say. Her son, this Norman Bates, he found them both. Guess it was pretty much of a shock. Way I remember it, he was laid up in the hospital for a couple months after. Didn't even go to the funeral. But I went. That's how I'm sure his mother is dead. Hell, I was one of the pallbearers. Dun, dun,
Dun, dun,
dun.
dun. There you go. So after Lila and Sam decide to go investigate, Lila ends up inside the Bates estate looking for Norma because she wants to talk to her. But then gets down in the basement because she's hiding from Norman, who has come back to the house now. And in the basement, in the cellar, the fruit cellar, I've now found out that it is, she comes across a woman sitting in a chair. It swivels around and reveals, oh my God, it's a corpse. Dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm.
Is that from the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, her corpse is in the basement. The end plays out beat for beat the same. There was one thing that I had better in the book. Anthony Perkins in the wig and the dress. I don't know if you saw the expression on my face during that moment.
No, I did
but
not.
I could not take it seriously. He looked like a college student, like cross-dressing for a
okay.
fraternity hazing event. I thought this was much scarier in the book with like the makeup and he's like doing a creepy voice.
Yeah.
The movie's version to me just looked kind of half-assed.
Yeah, because he is just like wearing a wig and has like a gown like wrapped around his shoulders. Yeah, he didn't even particularly like change. He just like put like a bathrobe on or something like that. But yeah, it's the big reveal when he comes storming. Also in the movie, that moment I also thought was very strange. And I guess it's just down to like the idea that he's like, I don't know, because maybe it's because in this moment he's supposed to like, he is like truly. By the way, we're gonna this is complicated, like psychiatric, like.
And all dated.
And all very dated. So, like, we're going to try to discuss the movie and probably going to talk about it in a way that's not, like, the most psychiatrically correct or, up to date or anything like that. But in that moment, in the movie, he's like, I guess he is like, he's sort of embodying his mother. Like, at this point, he's, like, become
he's, like,
his mother
in
fully.
the mother persona.
Because, like... But that moment where, like, Sam grabs him, his reaction I always thought was really strange. He just, like... flops over and like screams without screaming. I don't know what he's supposed to be doing there. I don't know. The only thing I can think is that, and it's the only thing that makes any sense, is that that was a direction because they wanted him to visually mirror the corpse of his mother in that moment. Like her mouth is open and like she's kind of leaning.
Yeah.
And if you look and compare like the way he looks when Sam like grabs him, it looks kind of similar. And that's my only thought, is that they were going for that like visual parallel, because the actual act, like the actual like why is he behaving, like why is he like flopping around like a fish like when Sam grabs him? I didn't understand that at all. I don't know, it felt very strange.
It's because he's an old lady.
That's my only thought, is that because like he's an old lady at that point, so he's, I don't know, it still feels weird. The whole thing felt strange. I don't love that last moment in the movie.
It's a very strange note to kind of end on.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was interesting. But then it's revealed in the movie that, well, we get this big long denouement from the psychiatrist where he explains that he has, I don't even remember what he calls it, maybe split personality.
I think he does call it split personality disorder in the movie.
Which the name of that has changed a lot over the years. It is now most commonly referred to as dissociative identity disorder, I believe. And it's also a very complicated.
It's complicated, and our perception
disorder,
of what it is and
in
what
popular
it means
media
has
changed, and it's also widely not very rarely is it ever shown in media like accurately at all. And so most likely your perception of any split personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, whatever, if your perception comes from media, it's most likely inaccurate. Just want to throw that out there. But that is what the movie is going for here. And I wanted to know if we get that if that's the same explanation in the book that is in the movie, that he has like dissociated into his mother's persona, basically. Yeah. As like a defense mechanism.
The next to last chapter is basically that whole scene with the psychiatrist. It's very similar, like very expository denouement, where the psychiatrist explains to us all He unmasks Norman Bates.
Yeah, what has happened here? Yeah. Yeah, it is very, it's a very Scooby-Doo moment. Where
That's not Norma. That's Norman.
Yeah. And then a big long monologue about like why and how and whatnot. Okay. And then finally, I want to know if we end on the monologue with Norman in the cell. I copy and pasted the whole thing. The main line I'm wanting to know is the line that everybody remembers because it's the last line in the movie. I'm not even going to swat that fly. I hope they're watching. They'll see, and they'll know. And they'll say, why? She wouldn't even harm a fly. I want to know that specifically, but like the whole monologue in general, if that's how we end the book, and specifically the fly line.
Yeah, so this is basically the last chapter of the book.
Okay.
Is this monologue from Norman as Norma perspective.
Yeah.
It's not the exact same verbiage, except for the line about the fly.
There you go.
But it is the same idea.
Does it end? Is it, when you say chapter 17, is that the last chapter?
Yes.
What's the last line of the book?
The last line of the book is, why she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Okay, so it's the exact same last line.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's the specific thing I was wondering. So the book ends the exact same way the movie does. Basically. I mean, same line at least. Cool. All right. I think I hit all the biggest moments. I hope so. Let's go ahead. I had one little quick question that I just wanted to see if there's any more information about in the book. So let's go ahead and talk about what was lost in adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
So I don't know if I missed it, or did Marion ever explain her plan in the movie? Like, she takes the money and then we see her driving to Fairview or whatever, and it's kind of piecemeal revealed that she's going to meet up with Sam. But I couldn't tell, like I said earlier, I couldn't tell if Sam was aware of this plan or in on it, or like if, like, what was her plan when she got there? Just give him $40,000. But then what, is she going back to her job? Like what, or was she running away? That was my question. Yeah. Like, is her plan to like convince Sam to run away with her with 40,000, or like, what's the plan?
So I don't think she really explains it in the movie. So I don't blame you for being confused by this. So there are a couple factors that I think don't quite come through in the movie. One of which is that nobody really knows about Sam.
I got the vibe of that, because because when they're leaving in the beginning, she's like, "What? We can't leave together," or she says, "Or can't we leave together," or something like that. So I got the idea that it was somehow kind of secret or whatever, but yeah, so I got that part.
So in the book, they haven't actually known each other for very long.
Yeah.
They're engaged, or they're like planning to get married at some point when he pays off his debts.
Yeah.
But they haven't actually known each other for very long. And again, like I said, we never actually see them interact. Mm-hmm. So her plan, basically, and it is kind of a half-assed plan.
Yeah.
Because she just kind of sees this opportunity and seizes it.
Yeah.
Basically, her plan is to drive up there and tell him that she received an inheritance from a relative, and to try and convince him to use it to then pay off his debts. And she's not going to say anything to her sister, so that her sister doesn't know, like, where she is and can't, I guess, be considered like an accessory when they come looking for her. So I guess her plan is like, it's not much of a plan, like I said. But I guess she's thinking that if she just goes far enough away, that she can kind of like disappear into this small town. Okay.
I guess that's fair. Like, she's just thinking she can go up there and then nobody knows about Sam, so like they won't know where she went.
Right. They won't know where she went. So as long as her sister doesn't like rat her out.
Yeah. They just won't
won't be able to find her. And her like her other part of the plan is not to tell him about like the full amount. She's like, "Oh, I'll just tell him I inherited like just enough."
Yeah. What's she gonna do with the rest of it?
I put it in the bank, I guess. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Put it in her mattress. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just like, because I couldn't tell like what her plan is. Like, is she just gonna run away? Like, yeah, and it doesn't really matter. Like, you just know, like, she saw the money, she's taking it, and
well, right, and like I said, it's not a very good plan.
No,
but
no,
it wasn't like she's a criminal mastermind here in this moment.
And it was at least partially. And I guess I should ask this because in the movie, it was at least partially, I think, motivated a little bit by spite. Like, because the guy was such an obnoxious asshole.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I think that helped make that decision easier for her than if, like, you know, I don't know if she would have done it if it was just a normal, like, business transaction and, like, she hadn't had this weird creep, like, hitting on her and being, like, a, you know.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I think that played into her decision to be like, fuck this guy, I'm taking his money. Like, he's not going to miss it, you know, because he's, like, talking all this game about how much money he has and all that sort of stuff. And I think that sort of pushed her. Mm-hmm. Does that conversation with the guy happen in the book or anything like that?
Not that exact conversation. I will say, and this was actually my first note and better in the book, so I'll just talk about it now. Something that I liked was that her boss also seemed kind of slimy in the book, which helped me like further feel justified in her taking the money.
Yeah.
I think I would have felt justified in it anyway because fuck rich people. But you know.
Yeah.
But it like her boss also seems kind of slimy. I didn't get the vibe in the book or in the movie that she like necessarily hated her job. But in the book, I definitely did like get the vibe that it wasn't like a great place to work.
Okay.
So when she like sees this opportunity, she really seizes it. Yeah. And like big asterisk there that I may have read too much into that. Yeah. But it was the vibe that I got.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Because in the movie, definitely don't feel like her boss doesn't come across as shady or anything like that.
No, he comes across as like kind of an upstanding businessman.
Kinda, it's like so I think it's interesting though in the movie having that character be this like slimy, obnoxious blowhard who again is like flaunting his money and stuff, and she's like, nah, all right, I'm just gonna take it. But yeah, she didn't think out the plan too much. It was sort of a spur of the moment thing, and she just kind of going with it. So
yeah, she didn't really think it through.
No. All right, let's go ahead now and find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh yes, I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So I had some mixed feelings about casting a traditionally handsome guy as Norman Bates. So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. In the book, he's like chubby and homely and super awkward. Basically, if the sad internet virgin stereotype came to life, that's Norman Bates in the book. And I felt like there was some interesting potential retroactive commentary. Because we have this guy who, like, and Mary sees him and she's like, oh, he's not a threat. It's fine. I can go up to his house and have dinner with him. Yeah. Because he's not like this kind of traditionally masculine guy. Right. But he's also like, because we're in his perspective for most of the book, I was reading it and I was like, Robert Bloch just like wrote the incel blueprint.
Yeah.
Right here. Like it is that stereotype come to life in these pages.
Interesting.
But like also Anthony Perkins is so good and comes off as so normal and charming. Yeah. And I think there's also something to be said for playing him ordinary. Yeah. Where he just seems like a normal guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he does just seem super, like, normal.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting that they cast kind of similar-looking actors as Norman and Sam.
They're both similar-looking?
They're kind of similar-looking. They're both, like, tall, dark-haired, white guys.
Yeah, I don't think they're particularly similar looking.
I'm not saying they're the same.
No,
I said they're similar.
Okay,
looking.
I guess. Yeah. To me, Sam is much more of like your traditional. He looks like young. What's his name?
Yeah, Sam is your more traditional hottie. He's like captain of the football team guy. Norman,
he looks like young Marlon Brando, actually.
Anthony Perkins is like kind of nerdy looking, but like maybe he gets made over by the popular girl in the movie, and now he's cute too.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't watch a ton of old movies, but I was really blown away. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. By Anthony Perkins' performance in this movie seemed way ahead of its time to me. Like, it's way more subtle and subdued than I feel like a lot of acting from that time period feels.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, he's doing a lot of little subtle things here and there. Like, there's this moment when he's talking to, I think it's Detective Arbogast out on the porch before they go into the office to talk. And he has this like random throwaway kind of offhand comment that he makes about like changing the sheets. I don't remember what it is, but he has some sort of like throwaway line that felt like a very, a much more modern type of like delivery, and even the line itself, which I assume was probably the part of the screenplay and not something Perkins just did, but maybe, I don't know. And I wish I didn't write down the exact moment, but it's like I said, he's talking to Arbogast outside, and he has like this, as before they walk inside, he has this little throwaway like kind of comment that he makes at the end of his sentence.
I always change the beds here once a week, whether they've been used or not. Hate the smell of dampness, don't you? It's such a, I don't know, creepy smell. Come on.
And all of it feels really natural and really, again, subtle compared to what I was expecting, what I would expect from this kind of performance from the 60s, I feel like. Or the 50s, honestly, because this is like, the movie came out in 1960. So, I don't know, it's just, it's very interesting. Crazy good performance, which I think he won awards for this, I think. He was at least nominated. Oh, no, he wasn't. Because I remember I read all the things it was nominated for. Yeah, he wasn't even nominated. Janet Leigh was for her 30 minutes in the film for Best Supporting Actress. But yeah, he was not nominated for Best Actor, which is wild. He was nominated by the Bambi Awards.
I've never
German
heard of that.
award for media. That's the only thing that gave him any awards, though, was the Bambi Awards. Janet Leigh got nominated in several categories from different things, and the movie did in random things, but yeah, because I thought he was phenomenal.
So we mentioned earlier that Marion's character actually gets her head cut off in the shower, which doesn't happen in the movie, which is fine.
Yeah.
Also, I guess they would have had to use like a wax dummy to do that.
They wouldn't
I
have.
don't know.
I don't even know if they could get by with the ratings board and stuff at the time, what they could even show.
True.
This movie was already pushing the edge of like what they could show with the ratings board and stuff at the time. So
Well, okay, so that's the reason why, but regardless, there should have been way more blood in that bathroom.
There definitely should have been more blood. There's not
nearly enough blood.
No.
For somebody who got stabbed to death.
And not that, and as many times as that we see her get stabbed in the movie, which is like dozens and dozens of times. Yeah.
I needed Arbogast to wear a Stetson in this movie. I don't know why I needed it, but I did. And he didn't wear a Stetson. He wore like a boring, dumb fedora.
Yep.
So that was better in the book. I liked just skipping to him taking a tour of all the like local hotels. We see like a montage of him asking at all of the local hotels and motels in town. But I didn't think it made sense that he then called and checked in with Lila. In the book, when he talks to them, they make a deal that if he doesn't find anything in 24 hours, then they're going to go to the police. So it made sense to me in the book that he called her and told her what he found at the Bates Motel and what he was like further planning to try to do there, but that didn't make sense to me in the movie. I didn't think he had any reason to like call and check in with her.
I just assumed it was just like he's just they hired him. He's just like, here's what I found out. He's just calling him and telling him.
Did they hire him in the movie?
Yeah. Yeah. They said
sure?
I swear they say at one point that
because in the book, he's hired by the company, like her boss.
Oh, I could have sworn in the movie that they said Sam and Lila hired him, but I could be wrong about that. But I could have swore that at some point somebody says something about
If I missed that,
them
if that's
hiring
the
him.
case, because yeah, that's not the case in the book.
Okay.
He's like a company man who
Okay.
like basically like a bounty hunter, I guess.
He's looking. He's
Like retrieving assets.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. No. In the movie, I got the feeling, and I could be wrong with this, but I got the vibe that he was like They hired him, like, because he's a private investigator, and they hired him to like. Her sister went missing, and she's like, "I need you to find my sister." So she paid him, and that's why he's calling
If
in.
if anyone knows which one of us is right, let us know.
I am 99% sure what I said about the movie is correct, but
A little thing that didn't come through in the movie is that Lila looks a lot like Mary. So when she gets to the Bates Motel and Norman sees her, he has this moment of panic and thinks he's like seeing Mary's ghost come up out of the swamp for him.
okay, sorry. A private investigator named Arbogast approaches Sam and Lila, saying that he had been hired to retrieve the money. So you're right. This is from the movie's plot synopsis. So yeah, then in that case, I could have swore in my mind I had it that they had hired him.
I mean, if they had hired him, then it would make perfect sense that he would call and check in.
I
with
don't know
them.
why he would, other than, yeah, I don't know. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, because in this it says that he had been hired to retrieve the money, but which that implies that like the company had hired him or something like that to get the money, and that he was just kind of talking to them to get information or whatever. So yeah, I don't know why he would call and report into them and not like the business or whatever. Anyways, okay, sorry.
So in the movie, the thing that they find in the motel room that tips them off that Mary was there is a little scrap of paper with 40,000 written on it, which we earlier saw her tear up and flush down the toilet, but apparently that little scrap of paper
Didn't
survived.
Yep.
In the book, what Lila finds is one of Mary's earrings crusted with blood. And I think that's much more interesting and dramatic. So in the movie, what we see are Lila and Sam sneaking into room number 1. In the book, they ask to be put in room number 1. And I don't know, it's different, again, because in the movie, we're not in Norman's perspective, but we are in the book, and he, like, at that point has sussed out who they are.
Yeah.
And so he's like spying on them through the peephole. So he knows that they've found the earring and like are figuring out maybe what happened.
Yeah.
And that's what sets off his rage then, that causes him to go into mother mode.
Yeah. I think I like the movie's version just because it keeps things more up in the air for the audience. Like it keeps things more suspenseful in that we don't know what he knows. We also don't know at this point that for sure that he's he's the one murdering people,
right?
Or that like we still think it's possible there could be somebody else up in the house or something like that. We're not sure. And so having him kind of be in the dark, and then like him realizing, oh, she's up at the house, and then that's what sets him off, and he goes and runs up there to stop her. Because even at that moment where she's up in the house snooping around and he's going up there to stop her, we still don't know why he's like, is she gonna find somebody? Is there somebody else up there? You know what I mean? Like, so it still keeps that suspense and that like mystery going until the very final moment. Whereas I think in the books, from what you described, if it did it the way the book did, I think that would release some of the tension, because like we know that he knows what's going on. Like we know that he's watching them, and so it's like, oh well, he's like figuring out what they're up to. I don't know. It just seems less tense to me.
That's
potentially.
Fair, yeah.
Just from what you described.
I mean, it is a really creepy scene where he's watching them.
Yeah.
I will say.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Now it's time to go ahead and see what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I liked that the movie set up more of a breadcrumb trail for eventually tracking down Marion, with her boss sees her at the intersection leaving town, and then we have the cop who won't leave her alone. And I thought I liked that. Like you said, it is a good way to build up tension. It also kind of releases us from later on having to explain how Arbogast was able to track her to Fairview, or I think it's Fairvale.
Fairvale,
in
whatever.
In the book, I don't know.
I
if
think
they
it might
kept
be in the
the
movie
same.
too. I don't know.
But we don't have to like stop and explain that because it's just pretty obvious. Like she left a pretty wide trail in her wake. When Marion gets to the hotel, I liked that we had this moment lingering on Norman making the conscious choice to put her in room 1.
Yeah.
Where he could spy on her through the peephole.
Yeah.
Because he initially reaches for a different set of keys and then he's like, room 1.
Yep.
Creeper.
We
mentioned the taxidermied birds. That was a change that I liked. I think the only specifically mentioned animal in the book is a squirrel.
Yeah.
Which is not as creepy. I liked Norman Bates' more subtle reaction to Mary suggesting that he put his mother in an institution. He gets upset by that in the movie, but in the book, he like flies into a rage and like shouts at her. But I liked it playing it more subtle.
Yeah, it is still he snaps in a way in a movie that was enough for me that if I was her, I'm like, well, I'm not staying here anymore.
Yeah.
In that moment when I was watching the scene, like as soon as that happened, I'd be she kind of reacts to it, but not enough. I was like, nah, I'm out. There's something. I don't know what's going on here, but
I'll keep driving.
I'm gonna keep driving. Especially when he told her she's 15 miles from Fairville.
Yeah, that's not that far.
What are you? That was so stupid.
Come on, girl.
When she found that out, I'm like, oh, well then I'm not wasting my money staying at this moment.
Yeah, no.
15 miles are there in 20 minutes. Like what? What are you doing? Yeah. Assuming he wasn't lying, which I don't know why he would be at that point.
I don't know why he would be in that moment. There's this moment in the book I was really glad they skipped. I mentioned that Lila looks a lot like Mary. All well and good. They're sisters.
Yeah.
But because of that, in the book, when Lila shows up at Sam's, it's like kind of dark. And he like immediately just starts making out with her. Because he thinks she's Mary.
Nice.
And the movie skipped a lot of other like little bits here and there that I thought the whole like second half-ish of this book that Block was going to have Sam and Lila end up together.
Yeah.
At the end. And they didn't.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. But I really spent that whole portion of the book being like, this better not. You better not. You better not. Because gross.
Yeah, that would have been something.
Speaking of physical similarities between Mary and Lila, I'm going to go on a rant for a minute. This book fell into a men writing women cliche. But it's one that some people might not be so familiar with, which is that men generally seem to have no fucking idea what different weights look like at different heights.
Yeah.
Not a goddamn clue. So Arbogast describes Mary as being around 5'5", which is around 165 centimeters for our non-American friends, and around 120 pounds. Okay. 5'5", 120 pounds. Okay, fine. 120 being the magic number for women is a whole other issue, but fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But then, a little while later, Lila is described as not as heavy as Mary. And excuse the fuck out of me, not as heavy? Robert Bloch. Do you not understand how thin a 5'5" woman weighing 120 pounds would be? Because clearly not.
Yeah.
I'm going to provide some clarity here. I'm 5'3", okay? 2 inches shorter than Mary is supposed to be. And a couple inches can make a huge difference in how weight looks on a person. Mm-hmm. Because when a person is shorter, that weight is squashed into less space than when they're tall. Yeah. And I'm chubby now. Not looking for anybody to soothe my ego here. It's true. I'm chubby and I'm cute and it's fine. But at my very, very thinnest in high school, I was very thin. Talking visible bones here. I was not healthy. And at 5'3", rail thin, bones poking out, I weighed between 125 and 130.
Yeah.
And now there are a lot of different factors that affect weight and what someone looks like. No two people carry weight in the same way, and that means that the number on the scale is a good indicator of absolutely diddly fucking squat. But the fact is that a 5'5" woman weighing 120 pounds would be very thin and not even a little bit heavy. No. So absolutely fuck you to the ends of the earth, Robert Bloch. I also really liked that the movie showed Norman standing by the swamp while Sam yells for Arbogast. We don't see that in the book. We just find out later that he was hiding in the house with all the lights turned off. Not very interesting.
Yeah, also that shot in the movie, it's like this Dalian shot, and he stands and he turns away from the swamp, and his face is completely in darkness, and this like the sides of his face are rimmed with light, and it's such a cool fucking shot. It's so good. It's so sick.
I liked Lila reasoning that Norman might have wanted the $40K to like get out and start a new business or new life since the motel is basically failing.
Yeah.
It's a theory that doesn't come up in the book, but it's a theory that makes perfect sense. That if he had somehow found out about all that cash, that maybe he would just dispatch her and take the money. Yeah. And my last note here, I like that the movie clarifies that Norman is not what both the book and the movie call a transvestite.
Yes.
Which, again, is another dated term.
Very dated term. Yeah.
Late 50s, early 60s dated term.
Yeah. Which, by the way, in case you aren't aware, if they were referring to a trans person, you would say trans. You would not say trans. That is considered a very outdated term.
Very outdated.
There are some people who might still use it. People who are trans who've claimed that term and still use it themselves. That it's rare, but it does happen. But in general, as a society, that's not a term we use anymore.
We've moved on from that one. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think what they are meaning here is transgender.
Yes. That's because that's
what we would say.
That's what
now.
the term used like. That
but it's still like not correct because Norman Bates is not identifying as a woman or like he is becoming his mother.
Yes, it's very different situation. Yeah.
But the movie actually acknowledges that those are two different things.
Yeah, the movie does relatively, again, in very dated terms and in very dated language, does at least seem to acknowledge that there is a difference between the situation that Norman Bates is in and what a trans person would be, their situation would be. It's like, these are not the same thing. All right, we've got just a few things, and the movie nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
We already talked about a lot of stuff that I had in the movie nailed it. So this is a very short section.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things I wanted to mention. Mary does trade her car for a different one, like we see her do. She actually does this twice in the book.
Yeah.
In an effort to shake anyone following her. But I think probably what she actually did was make it easier for someone to follow her. But
potentially,
regardless.
yeah. I think switching cars makes sense at one point, but you wouldn't want to do it at like an actual car.
Yeah.
You would want to find like in the modern day, you would want to find like somebody on like Craigslist or something.
Yeah. Or just like drive around until you saw a car with like outside
you would want to find a car
with
outside somebody's
numbers
house. Yeah, exactly.
With a for sale
you wouldn't
sign.
want to go to a car dealership where they could.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, back then, who knows how much paperwork was being done. Although he did take her pink slip and stuff, so yeah.
Another thing that the movie nailed was the way that Norman gets rid of the murder evidence. Basically the same. Put everything in the trunk of the car, sink the whole thing in the swamp. The only big difference is that in the book, he puts her body in like a clothes hamper before he puts it in the car.
Yeah, he just wraps her in the
but otherwise
in the shower curtain.
Otherwise, pretty much the same.
Oh,
sink it all in the swamp.
Sink it in the swamp. All right, we got a few odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
The moment there was a moment in this that made me think back to our First Blood Rambo episode, because there was another relatable secretary moment for me.
I remember that, yeah.
This time it was trying to do secretary things while an old white man who thinks he's really cool talks at you.
Yeah.
Very relatable experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was really funny that when Marion arrives at the hotel, we hear Norman say, "Gee, I'm sorry I didn't hear you in all this rain. Go ahead in, please." And in that moment in the movie, you can see his face in his mouth, and it is not moving. That was a line they put in to cover that moment.
I didn't notice.
Oh, 100%. His you can clearly see his face, and he is not talking. But they just added that line in. And it made me chuckle because it was some pretty mediocre ADR, but I guess you can get away with it when the rest of your movie's a masterpiece.
I guess so. Speaking of a masterpiece, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Janet Leigh's eyebrows in this movie are on point. They are immaculate. As a person who freehand draws her eyebrows on every day, I was very impressed with the eyebrows.
I know. It's one of the eyebrows are just one of those things that always crack me up because there's something I never even look at, but people spend so much time thinking about them and messing with them, and they're like the last part I noticed.
I look like an alien from a sunless planet if I don't draw my eyebrows on.
Whatever. I'm just saying, I don't know. Anyways. Also, I realized in this movie how much Will Wheaton reminds me of Anthony Perkins in Psycho, especially Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher in Star Trek TNG. He has like the same nervous energy, and he's also has I think it's his eyes or something. Something about his face also looks very similar, but his acting is. Anthony Perkins is much better than Will Wheaton in Star Trek TNG. He was a kid at the time.
Wasn't he a kid?
He was young at the time, but it's notoriously very up and down with Ensign Wesley Crusher, but he does have that same kind of like nervous incel energy that Norman Bates has, and I was like, holy cow, it's wild to me how much Ensign Wesley Crusher reminds me of Norman Bates. Also, at the shower scene has obviously been talked about a lot. It's a masterpiece, but that shot at the very end, starting as like a super close up of her eye, and then pulling back. I think that's the shot they were talking about that I talked about in the prequel about being very difficult with pulling focus. Mm-hmm. And upon seeing that, I can imagine now why it would be more difficult than I was originally anticipating, because it's a very long focus pull. I also don't even know how you would do that with a camera at the time. I don't know. To go from such a tight like macro shot to pulling out to like a medium shot is very impressive and super cool. Just a dynamite shot.
I was reading something about that shot today, actually, while I was working on these notes, and apparently they didn't use like a contacts or anything. She just held her eye open.
And that was one of the things I saw was that one of the notes I saw was that that shot was hard because she kept blinking and stuff. Yeah. So they had to do it a bunch of times. But they also, another note was about like the focus and like pulling the focus and stuff was difficult because you had to do it manually. And I was like, but you do that all the time. But I was like, I don't know. I think there's more because it's such an involved shot. And again, it's not a normal pulling focus from like, oh, we moved from like a medium shot to a close up and I pulled focus. It's like we moved from a macro close up of an eyeball all the way out to like, it's not a wide, but it's like a pretty wide medium shot of her body laying out of the shower. And yeah, the whole time she has to not move, and she does a pretty good job. She twitches like once, like a little bit, but like you can barely notice it. It's a crazy shot. And then we just get one of the most tense scenes in movie history, watching a grown man wash a bathroom. Just like him like wiping down a bathroom, and it's like incredibly tense.
The moment, I loved this moment when he's watching her car sink into the swamp. and it's almost all the way in.
Yeah.
And it just stops sinking. And he just looks around like, what the fuck do I do?
Go jump on it. Like, I don't know.
It was like legitimately kind of funny.
It's a great moment. It was very funny. I also thought it was really funny at the end when the psychiatrist gives his whole monologue. He's like milking this whole thing. Yes. Like there's this moment where he's like, and then he saw her, a nubile, beautiful young woman, and he wanted to kill her. To the family and friends of the victim. He's like doing like this weird, like, I was like, maybe he's a serial killer. Like he's doing this weird like drama read.
I think
to friends and family of the victim.
That he wanted to be an actor. And his parents made him go to medical school to be a psychiatrist. And he was like, this is my moment.
Yeah.
My time to shine.
I was like, this is really inappropriate, dude. This is really not how you do this. Well, or I like to imagine, that maybe that the guy was like, he wanted to, his dream was to be a psychiatrist in like, on the news or like, in like crime documentaries. Like he would be the psychiatrist that like you see on like, Dateline or whatever, of just like, because like that's the kind of speech he's giving, is like if you were doing like a dramatic like crime documentary and you're interviewing the psychiatrist, not like I'm talking to the family of the murder victim.
He just predicted true crime podcasts.
Yeah, he really did.
He's the original true crime podcaster.
He really is. He really is. It's wild.
I wanted to put a note in here because we talked about this in the prequel, but I did find the reference to the Gein case. Mm-hmm. It was Gein, right? I remembered that right.
Yeah.
And it's literally just one line in the second to last chapter. Some of the write-ups compared it to the Gein affair up north a few years back.
There you go.
And it totally feels like a sentence stuck in.
Yeah, just like...
just to acknowledge I didn't plagiarize this.
Yeah. Some people compared this to the Gein affair up north, but I assure you this happened before that.
Definitely, this is all unique.
Before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you one more time you can do us a giant favor by following us on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Goodreads. You can follow us on all those things. We post follow-up polls and all kinds of stuff so we can get your vote and your feedback, hear what you thought about each of the movies and stories that we talk about. Also, you can support us on Patreon, like I mentioned at the beginning, patreon.com/thisfilmislit. You support us there for $5 a month or more, and you get access to our bonus content, including the one we're recording right after this, which is coming up for our September episode, which is Get Out, as I mentioned before. And once again, we would like to thank Gray Hightower for suggesting that we do Psycho to kick off our spooky season. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
I don't remember if this came up during the prequel or if I just saw it somewhere while I was doing research. But I recall seeing or hearing a quote from Hitchcock that was something like, all of Psycho came from Robert Bloch. And I would say that that's true. This novel and movie are incredibly similar. It's the same plot, it's the same characters, it's the same explanation of what went down. But we've only kind of touched on the biggest difference between the book and the movie, which is that we spend like 75% of the book in Norman's perspective. And I have to say, it's really interesting. Robert Bloch digs into Norman's issues in a way that doesn't reveal the ultimate explanation, but does scatter enough breadcrumbs that once you know what happens, you can look back at some things and see how they also equal up to this, like, quote-unquote split personality plot. Mm-hmm. There's a section late in the book that I particularly liked where Norman is reassuring himself that Mother is locked up in the cellar, and as long as she's there and I'm at the motel, everything will be fine, as long as we're separate and
Right.
she's in the house and I'm at the motel. And I thought it was a really interesting and effective way to convey like compartmentalization as well as tell the story on multiple levels.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of Freudian stuff going on in this book, like a lot.
Yeah.
Do I think that being a Norman Bates perspective in the movie would work? No, I don't. Because film is a visual medium, I think we need an extra layer of separation from the villain in order for the late reveal of who is actually who
The killer, yeah.
to work. This is definitely one where I would say if you are a fan of the film and you haven't read the book, read it. It's basically the same story, but with more psycho.
Yeah.
Well, I do think it's a shame that not a lot of the twisted inner workings of Norman Bates came through in the film. I think I enjoyed the movie's portrayal of a mild-mannered Norman Bates a little more. Now, obviously, by the time we watched the movie, I knew how it ended and what the big reveal was.
Yeah.
But I do think, like you mentioned, that Anthony Perkins' portrayal of Norman Bates could make that ending more unexpected and wild. And I don't know what more I could ask for of a Hitchcock film. So it doesn't surprise me that he made those choices.
Yeah.
I also liked that the movie dropped some of the hints at a relationship between Lila and Sam. I also liked that it bothered to clarify that Norman isn't actually transgender/transvestite, as they say in the book and movie. Now, I do think this is a similar situation to like Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Where though, even though they say,
it's
Buffalo
not,
Bill
yeah.
isn't actually, like, the damage is still
It's
done.
still done.
Guys, it's still done.
We're still doing the cross-dresser as a murderer trope that is... Now, to be fair, at the time, it wasn't much of a trope. I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but it was much less of a trope than it had become in the intervening years since Psycho. But, yeah. But either way, it's still, yeah.
At least the movie puts that caveat in there where the book did not. Like, the book was totally fine with leaving it at oh, yeah, he wants to be a woman.
Yeah.
And, like, no, that's a whole totally different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the movie, like you said, specifically, the psychiatrist is like, no, because one of the people is like, oh, he's trans or whatever, and he's like, no, he's not. He doesn't want to be a woman or whatever. He wants to be his mother or something like that.
Yeah, very different thing going on there.
Not even that he wants to be his mother, it's that he,
it is?
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, I'm going to give this one to the movie.
Fantastic. All right. Hope you all enjoyed coming along on our ride as we discussed the classic Hitchcock horror film Psycho. Katie, what's coming up next? Is it more spooky?
More spooky. We have another thriller. We will be talking about Don't Look Now.
I don't know what this is.
Which is a short story by Daphne du Maurier, adapted into a 1973 film.
Huh.
This is another patron request. We had some spooky patron requests that I was saving for spooky season. And now we're here.
I just Googled Don't Look Now, and one of the top results was, like people ask, is Don't Look Now scary? And I clicked on it, and it led to a Medium article that said, Don't Look Now is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen without featuring a single jump scare.
There you go.
So if that's
something
not a
to
good,
look forward to.
That's not a good, if that doesn't pull you in, I don't know what would. Oh, it's got Donald Sutherland in it. If that doesn't get you interested, I don't know what will. Yeah, Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. I don't know who that is, but
I'm pretty excited. I have not read anything I have read because Daphne du Maurier wrote The Birds. I forgot about that. So that's the only other thing that I've read by her. She also wrote My Cousin Rachel, which I would like to do on this sometime because I thought that movie looked interesting.
Yeah. Julie Christie, fun fact, plays Madame Rosmerta in the Harry Potter films. She's only in like 2 or 3
Yeah, I
of
was
them.
going to say she was not very much in the movies.
No, not very much in the movies, but she is in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Duly noted.
Wild.
Now you got one fun fact
Out of the way. Yep.
Ahead of the prequel.
That's going to do it for this episode. We'll be talking about, we'll be previewing Don't Look Now and giving our recap and our fan reaction to Psycho in our prequel episode in 1 week's time. And in 2 weeks' time, we're talking about Don't Look Now. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.